Hello and welcome to the third installment of my production vlog for my short animation movie Colors of the Wind. Today I am going to be talking about the effects approach to the scenes or to one particular scene that I'm working on and what my principles are behind this approach. It will sum up basically the 2D animation workflow for After Effects, and I will try to keep it brief because you could always go very, very much in depth. If you're interested in this, let me know. I could make this a tutorial or a step-by-step tutorial, but this is just for the overview of my approach. All right, so I'm going to pick up where I left off. And if you watched the last episode, it was about the character animation. And now I am adding particle effects and emitters and things like that to the scene to make it more alive, to add a little bit more of the weather behind it. So as you can see, if you remember, I have the vertical axis of my compositions, and I'm in the character layer, and my character is basically, you can imagine the stacking of effects is like layers. Whatever is above the character layer these are effects in front of the character, and layers behind the character will appear behind him, of course. So we have smoke, and this smoke, maybe I can show it by disabling the rest. Yes, I hope you can see it. It's a little bit faint, but this is smoke made by a plugin called Particular. And just to show you a little overview, it has so many sub parameters like emitter, particle, shading, physics, aux system, visibility, rendering, world transform, and each of these have thousands, not thousands, but a bunch of other sub-parameters. And what this allows me to do is basically define the way how the emitter or how the particle emitter works and what kind of forces are there that influence it. So I can, of course, define the color, define the particle count, define the direction, wind strength, gravity, all these kinds of things. And beyond that, I can make them also dynamic over time. So I can have wind changes, which I have implemented here. So in order for the smoke not to be static and flying across the screen, but actually interacting with the wind and having this impression of a stronger wind and a weaker wind, I have also set keyframes here to manipulate this. But I won't go too much into detail because there are so many parameters. I basically I do not understand everything, but I try to tweak a little bit and come up with something that satisfies me. And maybe I have something, let's see. Yeah, which, where is it? Yes, visualize fields. So basically, unfortunately, it just shows a little bit. Maybe I can push it more in the center of the screen. I hope you can see it. And here are different paths, how the wind influences the smoke. And if I deactivate it, you can see basically how the parameters will be influenced and how this looks like. And because it's in the background and I don't want the audience to see this digital effect, I usually put a blur on top of it, because within the motion you will recognize it as smoke, but when it's very clearly defined and very sharp, it's not very how do you call it? It's not very convincing, basically. So yeah, I usually for all kinds of particle effects, I usually try to put some kind of blur on top of it, maybe motion blur or just general blur, because in reality, whenever you have smoke, it's constantly moving, and the eye also sees this sometimes, especially if it's a very strong or influenced by a strong wind, smoke influenced by strong wind, it will appear blurry. So I try to activate motion blur whenever possible, because it also helps me to keep the eye distracted from all the mistakes I could be doing in the animation. So let me go back a few steps. All right. So yes, this is my bottom layer. Then on top of it, I have another emitter, and it emits basically just random particles. It's a cheaper emitter. It's built into After Effects. And the same goes here as well. I put some kind of distortion on top of them, so their path is a little bit non-linear. And I also apply motion blur on top of them, so you have the impression of dirt flying across the camera at strong winds. The next layer is my camera layer, my character layer, and then we have the same stuff happening in the foreground. We have bigger dirt particles on top of the character, which doesn't show because the seed is very random. Sometimes they appear, sometimes they don't. Let me see, maybe we have bigger particles somewhere here. Well, these bits and pieces you see are basically the dirt generator, if you like. And then, once again, smoke in front of the character. So all this layering sums up to 5 layers and plus background, so 6 layers. And it creates this illusion of depth. Here we have one of the cheaper particles. You know, you probably can see the quality differential between the plugin smoke and the After Effects particle emitter. But when you have motion blur on top of it, it kind of, the eye buys it, right? But there's another layer which I like to add, and this is basically a mask that defines certain areas as blurry as well. And this mask is basically elliptical. As you can see, this is the mask, and it has a very soft edge. And once I activate it, you will see that everything outside the mask is blurry, but in a specific way, because as I said in my last episode, I want to avoid the eye catching mistakes, maybe badly cut out layer or something like this. So I try to shift the focus of the eye to the area which is sharp, you know. Yeah, plus the smoke and the particles flying around are very secondary. They're not as important, but it's good to have some type of motion there to understand the weather conditions, the wind direction. It gives me a little bit more believability. And the blur effect is not, in this case, I didn't make it like a real camera blur, because I just experimented and found that this kind of milk glass blur, I like it more. It has a very interesting visual feel to it, so I left it. Maybe I will change it in the future, but I have to see this in succession with the other scenes. Maybe it won't work, maybe it will. If it does, I will just basically leave it there. And this is basically the composition stage with the character animation and the particle effects. But as I said, I have another layer, which is the camera shake layer. And here I have also a bunch of effects, namely rainfall, as you can see. Maybe, I hope YouTube compression doesn't kill it. But there is rain, there is some snow, because snow kind of looks like slower rain in the background, which I like, or floating dust particles, which is very interesting. They are also heavily modified in terms of direction, wind strength, seed, randomness, and things like this, and color, and so on and so forth. I have also noise on top of it, because I think, or I believe, maybe it helps the compression of the video to stay sharp if you have a little bit of random noise here and there. Plus, it kind of looks like an analog analog how do you call it, movie format, so to speak. You know, the graininess of movies that are shown in theater have this type of graininess as well. And then I have an effect for a little bit more sharper edges. And then, which I haven't included yet, is brightness, contrast, and things like this. Because my setup at home is that I have 3 screens, and my 2 outer screens are kind of reference screens, because I can test how images and movies look on older screens, and usually they are way darker than on my main screen, which is relatively new. So I can adjust that. Yes, and that's basically it. So I want to show the final result in the end. And it looks like this. So you'll see all this layering stacked on top of each other. There's smoke in the foreground, snow, rain, dirt, again smoke in the background, and the background layer itself. I might tweak this a little bit, but as a rough, how should I say, rough stage, it is totally acceptable for me. That's it for this vlog. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, please feel free to post. And if you want to know more about the project, I will put a link into the description bar for more information. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Peace.